Alright, I've been playing through here a game from an older issue of Strategy and Tactics. This is Richard Berg's Hastings 1066, and I don't remember... There it is. It's from 1986. So this would have been... I just was looking at S&T and saw the old SPI logo on there, but this would have been in the TSR era. Which makes sense, given that, as you can see from these counters, they have the dreaded side-mounted. You can see I've kind of tried to trim some of the nibs off on some of these, but I didn't get all the way through all the counters, so they've still got the dreaded side nibs sticking out on them. But I just wanted to do, I've already played some of this. You can see here I'm already in the second, getting ready to start the second assault period. And as you can see, it's not really looking that good for the Normans at this point. All of the, I mean, granted, and I can get into this, all of the yellow pieces are kind of crap pieces there for the Saxons, but all those brown units along the front there, the really powerful housecarls, a lot of them have been reduced already, but again, as you can see, I mean, the Normans just don't have a lot of gas left in the tank. They do have a lot of knights left, but the knights are not particularly effective at getting up the hill, the slope of the hill there. So, anyway, I'll get to the process of the game there after I sort of do an explanation of the main reason why I wanted to do this video is to explain the fairly cool command system that this particular game has. So this is, again, Richard Berg design. From '86, from an older issue of Strategy and Tactics. In these older issues of Strategy and Tactics, one of the things you have to do is extract the rules. I, for one, cannot stand trying to read rules that are embedded into a magazine. I need the rules to be freestanding away from the magazine, so I don't have to flip through this big, heavy magazine while I'm trying to learn rules for a game. So I carefully extracted the rules and just and they came out easily. You know, you just pop the staples open on the magazine itself. The rules will come right out of the center, and then just took some staples and fit them right back through the holes that were already there, bent them closed, and voila, get a nice little sturdy rule book stapled together just like your magazine would be. So the control system in this, and you can see the map here, typical of older maps, and magazine game maps in particular in older games have plenty of charts on the map, because in a magazine game they don't usually print a lot of player aids, and you don't have a bunch of charts in the rules themselves. So and then fairly standard terrain here for the era. You know, looks a little bit like glare here. Looks a little bit like your SPI maps, but not quite the same. Clearly, we're into the TSR era here. Some of the textures and colors on the map and stuff aren't your vintage Redmond Simonson kind of stuff from SPI. So the objective here, obviously, Hastings 1066. This is a simulation of William the Conqueror's invasion of England, and the Saxon defense of, as you can see here, Harold's defense, along with his Saxons, of the Norman invaders. And so you've got, your armies are divided into sections. So for the Normans, you've got nationalities. You've got three different nationalities. You've got the Bretons over here, the green counters, the Normans, who are your red counters, who have the largest number of forces attacking. And you've got your Franco-Flemish forces, which are just guys from elsewhere around France, besides Brittany and Normandy. And they're sort of the second largest. I think the Bretons were the smallest, although they've also taken the most casualties. And you can see here their leader is wounded. So you've got the three different nationalities there on the Norman side, and then for the Saxons, you don't have any split between nationalities. You do have split between troop types. You've got the brown troops are your very strong. As you can see, they got an attack value of 7, defense value of 5, shield wall value of attack value of 3, defense value of 8, and morale of A. These are the best troops in the game. They are foot troops, though. They are, the Saxons do not have any mounted knights like the Britons do, which are 8-6. I guess you could say they're actually the best troops in the game, but they have certain disadvantages to them also that the Housecarls don't have. And then all these yellow guys are the Fjord, I think that's what they're called, which are sort of the rabble troops that that Harold had managed to scrounge up to come to the defense of London in the battle. And there, as you can see, there's some slingers in there, there's guys with javelins, and there's just guys with swords and javelins. Compared to the Housecarls, you can see there are 3 attack, 3 defense, morale D, pretty bad, and then the slingers even worse, 1, 2, and E. Those are your ranged troops, but Saxons only have 1 bowman unit, so they're not really relying a lot on missile fire. Obviously, as you can see, the Normans do have some bowmen, but they, as I've found in the game so far, have been largely ineffective. But so the Saxons don't have different nationalities, they do have the different troop types, but their armies actually split just into wings, and so each commander, there's 3 Saxon commanders, there's Harold and then 2 of his lieutenants, I forget, Leofwine and, was that Girth? So those guys are controlling your different sides, your different wings of the Saxon army, so you have 3 wings, and each wing will have a specific strategy that you pick for it and specific orders that wing undergoes. And unlike the nationalities here for the Normans, which are easy to tell apart, a little harder to keep your wings, the wings of the Saxon army, separate, especially when they're all clustered together on Senlac Hill. So there are rules in there where each commander of the Saxons can't command, he can't be in command of less than 33, or it's either 33 or 22%. I think it's if one gets killed, then it bumps up to each has to have at least 33% of the forces. But I think initially they only have to have 22% or some weird percentage number that they had to have control of in order to be in command, considered in command of a wing. Like you can't have one guy that just has 2 troops under him, and then the other 2 guys have all the rest of the army. It has to be fairly evenly split between the 3 leaders, presumably so you can't use the size of the wings to game the command system, which I'll explain here shortly. So commands are done with what you see over here, this strategy display. In the case of the Normans, you pick a strategy for each nationality. And then across the way there for the Saxons, you pick a strategy for each wing of the army, the left, center, and the right. And your strategy can be, we'll see over here, on the like the Norman Battle Order Termination table, you see you've got aggressive, moderate, cautious, and defensive. Those are your 4 battle strategies. And as you can see how it breaks down, depending on the strategy you pick and the number that you roll on 2 dice, 2 d6s, you'll either get hold, charge for 1 turn, charge for 2 turns, advance 1 turn, advance 2 turns, or you can choose, if you roll snake eyes, what you want your orders to be. And then you can see here there's something called a strategy effect, which has minus or plus values on it. What that is over here on the strategy effects track, and everybody starts at 0 here in the center of the track, and then we'll either start to advance up the track, which you can see the Normans have done, or down the track, depending on what kind of orders they end up getting. Now if you look here at the effects, you'll notice that charge, advance, all of the more aggressive orders have a positive effect on the track, which means if you look at the effects on the track here, if you start to get to these higher ends, there'll be letters there assigned to each type of troop. those letters have different effects. You'll notice here fatigue setting in at C, or at D, units exhausted. So as you continue to press, if you focus on aggressive and or even moderate, and you can still have end up with aggressive battle orders, you'll start to exhaust your troops, because at turn after turn you'll just be racking up these plus values. So if you switch over to cautious or defensive, then you can kind of give your troops a rest there. You see you'll get a -2. The problem is that you can see here by the distribution of these numbers, while the chances are good that if you say pick defensive, you will get a hold order, you could still end up with charge orders or advances, or even 2 turns worth of charges if you roll boxcars. So the die roll's not always going to go your way. Something I've definitely learned after playing through the first assault phase of the game. And you can see here this chart's split into 2 battle orders, because you've got knights and foot troops each have their own strategies. Obviously your foot troops don't have charge orders. They can just have simple advance to combat orders, or they can have a shield wall order. And the charge orders for your knights will allow them to, when they if they inflict a disorder result on an enemy, will allow them, that disorder result will instead be a rout result if the unit doing the attacking is under a charge order. So, charge can be valuable at the right time, but it can quickly exhaust your troops if you keep going for it. So I just think that's a really, really excellent way of allowing you to choose a battle strategy, but then leaving it up to, as especially earlier era combat like this, Middle Age, the Middle Ages of combat, or medieval combat like this, your troops aren't always going to do what you want them to do, and especially for this battle, which very much was lost by the Saxons, because Harold couldn't control his troops. They had actually a very strong position, defensive position on Senlac Hill here, and the Normans initially had real trouble trying to break through that line, which you can see I've had just the same trouble that the Normans historically did trying to break that line. And what they ended up doing was backing off, and the Saxons, thinking that the Normans were retreating, started pursuing them, and this allowed the Normans to isolate segments of the Saxon line off of their favorable defensive terrain and quickly cut them down, and then re-attack the weakened Norman position after hitting several parts of the Norman, or several parts of the Saxon army piecemeal. What I tried to do at the start of this battle, the Normans don't have forever to win. They have the onus is on the Normans to achieve their strategic objectives, which are certain hexes on Senlac Hill that they have to take. So they can't just sit there and wait for the Saxons to come off the hill. But on the other hand, the hill is a very strong position defended by these housecarls in the front line, and as you can see by the casualties, and I've got piles of units over there. The Saxons took a fair number too, but the Normans have less guys to attack with. But by the casualties here, you can see, and most of them, there's a couple of Breton knights in there that I lost in some rather unfortunate die rolls. But the footmen are what I initially assaulted the hill with, and they're assaulting up that hill at a -1 to their combat value against. And for the Saxons, I just went straight up defensive strategy. Which meant their units were in shield wall a lot. And those housecarls, their shield wall defense is an 8, and these footmen are coming up at a 3. So you're looking at, if footmen are attacking a shield wall, that's at a 3 to 8, which in this combat system, it's not a odds-based. The missile fire is odds-based, but the melee is simply differential-based between the strength and defense, attack and defense values. So the footmen are hitting at a -5, which is just terrible odds. I mean, there's just not a whole lot you can do at a -5. If you roll a 5, you can disorder your opponent, otherwise you just can't even damage them. So right off the bat, the Normans couldn't even attack the Saxon position. Now, essentially what I had to do as the Normans was hope that I could get a lucky orders die roll for the Saxons, where they would have to roll out for one of their wings of the army, they'd have to roll out an attack and pursue order, which they can get even if they're even defensive. They can still, I think there's I forget what the exact number is at defensive to get attack and pursue. Looks like a 5. Yeah. So, hoping that they would roll a 5 and get an attack and pursue, because if Saxon units get attack and pursue, they have to come off the line and move to the nearest enemy unit. So if I've got my Normans sitting back off the line, off the hill, that forces the Saxons to come out of their defensive position on the hill where I could try and hit them. Well, that just never happened the whole time. So I had to wait as the Normans for an opportunity for the Saxon orders to switch from either melee in place or advance to combat or from shield wall to something other than shield wall, such as advance to combat or melee in place or something like that, where they don't get that shield wall bonus. Where I had a better chance then of trying to, I think at a -2 instead of a -5, to try and inflict damage on those housecarl units. And it started to work after a while. I brought the knights in at certain times, so I was able to kill a goodly number of Saxon units, but that line essentially is still intact all along the front of that hill. And with that many units behind them, I don't know that the Normans have enough gas left in the tank here to actually accomplish their objectives and win, or maybe even force a draw at this point. Unless I get really lucky right off the bat, and somehow the Saxons either have to come off the hill, or I just get a bunch of lucky combat results and kill off a lot of those reduced housecarls, because otherwise I think there's just too many guys to get through there. So I might try a different strategy with the Normans and see if I can get any better effect. Now, as you can see, because of I pretty much just went defense straight through the whole first assault period. The Saxons are down into the bottom of the barrel in terms of negative effects on their troops. So all their troops are at -1 to their morale rolls and decrease their morale by 1 level. But really, for the Saxons, I think it's a fair trade-off. I don't mind the housecarls being at a B morale instead of an 8 morale, and getting a -1 off their die roll. They still make their morale checks most of the time, I think that's a small price to pay in order to have them be able to sit on the hill the whole time and not risk them getting attack and pursue orders where they have to come off that hill and chase down Normans out in the open, which is exactly what the Normans want. So I considered it a fair trade. Let their morale just reduce to the maximum negative. Still better than them running off and getting slaughtered by the Normans out in the open field. So I think really cool orders system that way, and I know Berg has done sort of these random order type things with chip draw type order systems in some of his more recent games, but I hadn't seen it implemented quite like this, and this battle really works perfectly for that kind of order system. It's not something that would work in every game, but when a particular era is well suited to a particularly well crafted orders mechanic, it just makes for a really, really interesting game. So this one, like a lot of magazine games, probably overlooked, fairly old, but I know I've heard other people talk about the order system, this being pretty cool, and that this is sort of one of those maybe a rare TSR era SPI gem. So definitely worth checking out. I probably won't do a recap on how this turns out. I mean, my suspicions is that it's not going to turn out well for the Normans, just because for the second assault phase here, the Saxons were able to maintain the integrity of that hill line, which I think is just going to be tough for the Normans to break through. So there you have it, a look at Richard Berg's Hastings 1066.